Americans. For today's guest, we have a special guest whose name is Harlow Reseburg. Harlow is an experienced craftsman, martial artist, entrepreneur, and performance coach with over 2 decades of experience. Driven to find the limits of human potential, he takes pride in finding the best possible daily rituals to maximize personal satisfaction and productivity in life. His primary goal is to work with highly motivated, independent, and aspiring entrepreneurs looking to develop self mastery practices to increase their overall impact and make a better world for everyone. He has also been a semi-finalist in Richard Branson's and Tim Ferriss's Build a Business competition. He helped find and negotiate solutions for several projects and advised hedge fund managers, angel investors, New York Times best-selling authors, and startups. Harlow is what I would call an extraordinary American, and I'm grateful to have him on this show. Harlow, are you there?
I am here.
Harlow, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me. I know that you are an entrepreneur, you're a performance coach, you've been a martial artist. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
Sure. I've done a lot of different entrepreneurial things. I've worked a lot of different jobs and whatnot. And I guess the first thing to point out is I didn't get married and raise a family, which is like a huge obligation and something that you take on to do. So having been single through my life, it gave me a lot of time and effort, time and resources to be able to have an adventuresome life. So I think that that's the first point to make. I've managed a martial arts studio. I got a degree in technology. That was my formal education. I quit that and became a professional artist blacksmith because I wanted to do that instead. And so I've had this like sort of winding road of entrepreneurial endeavors through my life, and did a lot of self-cultivation practice, read a lot of books, and did that kind of thing. So it's been an extraordinary journey along the way. And that's what has developed in this set of diverse skills that I have at this point.
So Harlow, I know like it's like usually like great decision, right? Like you either you're starting like a family and then like a lot of people have this thing like once they start like a family, they have all this duty and responsibilities. But then when you're like single and everything, that's when you can take more risks and all of that. Like what do you think about that statement where like you can actually take more risks when you're single and you have the like you if it's things go down, like it's fine, but like a lot of people like who have family like it they find it more riskier to start a business.
I think it goes back to like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is pretty commonplace. A lot of people understand that. It's about whether family is sort of your core value system or you use that to navigate your life with, versus some people say money, some people say religion, right? There's these different things that become more the center of how you make your decisions in life. And I think maybe if you switch around a lot, and you will switch some in life until you really kind of figure things out, I suppose. But if you switch around too much, that can be confusing too, but you got to switch around enough in order to kind of get your bearings. For me, it was one more of being principle centered, which Stephen Covey recommends as the core tenet, really. And so, yeah, I mean, it depends on how seriously you take your commitments in life. But if you're going to raise a family, that is a long-term, heavy commitment, right? Like it's a big commitment to raise a family. And I'm saying it just in that amount of time and commitment, then I was able to allocate in being a businessman or being an entrepreneur or something like that. So in being able to show up powerfully and authentically in the world, I think is about holding your commitments well and being able to articulate yourself well. It's what I help people do in my coaching. Those are the choices that we each make. And it's important to make those choices and then follow through on them, but not make those choices and then have your actions in your life be something else, right?
No, totally. Like one of the things that came to my mind, right? It was like I know, like my father's a business owner, right? When he did his business, he did with a family. But like in my case, one of the reasons like why I'm choosing career over family is because I wanted to be able to take these risks to basically do the business all together. And there's these two different worlds, right? There's a common misconception that you cannot start a bit like you cannot start a business if you have a family, but at the same time, like people that are saying like they take a lot of like financial risk, they had this feeling that they're missing out on, like it's kind of like the grass is greener on the other side. So it's just a thought that came into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's also seasons in life, right? And to some degree, I feel it's up to you to engineer your life, and so you can sequence these things separately. I'm not saying that being a successful business person or a successful anything else is mutually exclusionary to raising a family also. But if you're raising a family, like you say, to the risk idea, uh,
Mhm.
you can just travel faster and lighter if you're, say, single than if you have a family. You have to more carefully negotiate those risks. And so it sets you up for a different set of experiences. And I think it's important to point out because those experiences are what create the platform for your decision making and how you develop your business, whatever that would be. And that's what I run into a lot in working with entrepreneurs or visionaries who are like trying to launch a really great vision, whatever that idea would be, is what I see oftentimes is because the person's life path has gone this way, whatever that would be, that they're making decisions and they're saying, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. But it's like, I've taken these risks this way. I know what it's like to utterly fail, you know? Uh, that's maybe not the best approach. you know that's kind of how experience, I think, helps each other, right? Is to go, hey, there's a pothole there. uh just
No,
saying, you can fall in it if you want. I'm just saying there's one there. you know
like, so Harlow, the one question I wanted to ask you, and it's connected to this, is so like the motive, like everything in business is about like motivation, right? Like you go through the toughest times, like it's all about motivation. So there's business owners with families that whose main motivation is their wife and children. But then for
yeah.
us who are like single, our motivation comes from something else that's independent of family. And so in your case, like what was the motivating factor that drove you to into entrepreneurship and ultimately becoming a performance coach?
Probably my early commitment to martial arts and getting into that as an interesting thing. And it was really, I had a tough childhood, and so it was a pushback. So it started out as something I was pushing back against. So I embraced something that, in order to protect myself from the situation I grew up in. But then I really embraced it and I looked for where it could take me, and that's where I wanted to go. And so that really, I think, was sort of it was the space in which I felt like I really found myself. I felt like I became a man, right? Like it was during that part of my life also, right? From going into my teenage years to going into becoming an adult and moving out and going on my own, right? So it was circumstantial to that part of my life, which also created that. And so that's these separate variables. And then the third one is I was raised to just be a really hardworking blue collar type of person. And so I had a full-time job while I graduated high school. I got two more part-time jobs along with that full-time job. I used to work 7 days a week. I would drive a triangle, and so it can be daunting when you see my resume to see the amount of experience I had, but it's like I just had a ton of time to put in the LI experience. I have over a decade worth of time that I've worked 100 hours a week. And
Wow.
and so that's a
How did
couple
you,
of salaries.
okay, look, I know entrepreneurs and businessmen like they are ready to do 60 to 80 hours to make their business work. How did you do 100 hours? Like, how is that even sustainable? Even the
it
surgeons.
it's not sustainable. And that's kind of the point. Like I've spent a lot of time in that area, and so now I run into people who've had that. So, my question typically for somebody who's like really type A personality, really moving forward, my typical question is, do you know what the difference is between working an 80-hour week and a 100-hour week? Because an 80-hour week is fairly sustainable if you don't have a family, because the family's going to ask for some of that time too. But you can still sleep and stay somewhat healthy if you're working 80 hours a week. By the time it becomes 100 hours a week, you're now sacrificing sleep also. And so it's not, that's why I say it's over a decade's worth. It wasn't all continuous, because that leads to pretty radical burnout, and it's not good for your health and things like that. And so it's about being able to have a pace that is sustainable, to your point. And so you can't do it continuously, but you can do it seasonally, you know.
So, Harlow, what was your overall vision regarding your career altogether? And like, did it change over a period of time, like from when you were like in your early 20s to when you went through your 30s and 40s?
Yeah, totally. It changes. I mean, I think, and I think that's true for everybody at this point. It's just simply, if you look at the old industrial revolution template of a career, the term career, it was typically very long. It also had this thing at the end of it, which was called retirement. And I think that that whole thing, kind of part and parcel to the internet revolution and sort of the more fast-paced, ever-changing work environment, kind of the increase of all the technology and moving in from the industrial age into the information age, and more into now the experiential or wisdom age, kind of depending on how you frame that. Career is now becoming much shorter, more frequent changes. And so certainly mine has evolved. It's just that I guess maybe I had a little bit of a earlier start with regard to that. So I got to see the evolution of the implementation of computers. So this is before the internet. When I was in junior high school, kind of between grade school and high school, the school that we had got the first 3 computers in. One went in the grade school office for administrative purposes. One went in the high school office. It was like a 2-part building. And then one went in my science lab. And so I was one of those geeky kids who had like a 3-ring binder full of floppy disks and all that kind of stuff. So there again, timing and circumstance helped to sculpt the way I developed the arc of my career and how that's changed over time. And so now if you were asking me the same question, as far as the age goes, or if somebody else that we were talking to, those things play a large role. It's actually a big part of risk mitigation. If we're talking about finance, is to understand investment and divestment as 2 levers for risk. And so timing and circumstance are actually very large variables to how that developmental cycle works for each of us. And it's good to clarify what those are, I believe.
Hello, it's interesting that you mentioned about like computers, because I like, let's say like you're like in Generation X or Generation Y, like the millennials, and then the generation before that, like they went through like this transition. Like right now we have Generation Z that are like like they were born into computers, but there was a time when computers were not real, when were not applicable when it came to doing business, right?
Right.
And then we, like you and I, had to go through this transition where or like where we grew up in a world where computers weren't that important, and it slowly became important to business altogether, right? Like
Yeah.
now if you take a look at all businesses, they have to have a website if you want to get traction. Like you've got to, like, if you want to make it in this modern world. But like when you were in the 1980s or something, business was more offline, right?
Right.
And it's just like we live in a revolutionized world altogether. It's crazy how for thousands of years there was no such thing as the internet. There was no
Right.
online. And suddenly we're living in this crazy world, and everybody just thinks it's normal, but it's not.
You're right.
And like
It's paradoxical that in order to look more real, you have to have more virtual presence. You know what I mean? Like you have to, like you said, you have to have a website. You have to have a way to be contacted through a form or a lead capture or whatever. Or you should have a download or something. You know what I mean? Like all of the typical things that we're thinking about. But when you think about it, those are all virtual. And so we've somehow paradoxically gotten to a place where, in order to look more real, or maybe more capable or more astute to how the world is today, you have to have
It,
more virtual presence in order to look more real.
but that's ironically like it takes away the authentic like one like in businesses back in the day like for thousands of years you had this authentic connection where you see the customers in person but like now you have this virtual reality like where they see you through online first and in a way it gives you more freedom on
Yeah.
the online world has given more business like more people have become financially free because of online presence but at the same time it has also created a sort of inorganicness. But it's just a thought that came into my mind. It's like a paradox as you're talking about,
It's very
where
true. Yeah. Yeah, because I work with younger people, but I also work with older people. And that's why, so I'm either, depending on how you put the timeline, I'm a very late boomer or early Gen Xer, right?
so you've
And
seen the
so
entire transition take place. Like
I
you
was there for it to really turn over. And so boomers seem to struggle. Like they're like, this email thing, I don't know. But then young people also sort of have this, uh, I'll call it like a blindness because it's sort or taken for grantedness. That they're just they grew up as children in the constantly on, always connected type of world. And so they don't have an experience base of what it's like to not have that connection, right? That they'll actually even viscerally go into a panic when they are not fully connected. Andrea, we had spoken about her a prior interview that you did. She runs into this all the time, and so there's struggles in both directions, and I think that's why I say I feel very fortunate for having grown up at the time that I did. Um, it's very strange, but it's important to factor those things in contextually. The boomers are the people that now have all of the experiential wisdom, right? They have the longest track records in careers and business and stuff like that. And sometimes the biggest struggle is to just get them to relate to the Gen Z and Zoomers effectively without it just being a bumping the heads kind of scenario, right?
I think it's more like the boomers, like they lived in a different world, right? It was a world without internet. It was a world of like more authentic connection. But then the Gen
Yeah.
Y and Gen Z, they're living in a totally different world where it's considered normal. But like the world that they're living in is this is happening for the first time in human history. They don't like there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of chaos. People don't know how to adjust to this new reality, right? Like there's no
Yeah.
manual or guidebook telling people how do I adjust to this new world. Like on the online game, like it just changed everything, not just in business, but in like dating as well, right? Like normally, like let's give an example. In ancient times, like it would just be community. You'd get to know your future wife in the same social circle or like a friend group. Like now there's online dating apps and all social media. So like you are now having access to hundreds and hundreds of options, but in the process, your connection and even in biz and especially in business, like it's just created like a kind of like a distance, but simultaneously it increases your freedom as well. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's such a great point. And and to the entrepreneur in me or in us, to me that circumstance is also the biggest opportunity is
love
is to I think of entrepreneurship or wealth generation being a very similar type of a thing in the ability to rearrange time, effort, and resources from one person's plate to the time, effort, and resources on the other person's plate by way of a transaction, right? An exchange. And sometimes that's money. A lot of times it's other things too. Um, but that whole circumstance prior of more the tribe and the connected only to Mother Nature or the phenomenal universe as we would think of it, versus this new circumstance where there's so much hyperconnectivity. I mean, if you think about it, we used to have, I believe it's called Dunbar's number, right? The tribe, the group would get to about 150 and then it would naturally subdivide. But
Mhm.
now, like the average person, I don't know, last number I heard has got like 600 Facebook friends or something like that, right?
Actually, I would
We're,
say more like 1,000 at least.
yeah, and it'll probably just keep getting bigger, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the simple fact is we're not genetically, certainly our brains are not configured to function well with that much connectivity. It's hard to sort out, so it creates a great deal of confusion. And so I think this is sort of where we're evolving with regard to technology and the the all everything having sensors in it in order to create intelligence and stuff like that. Is we're evolving the technology because that can iterate quicker than we can handle it biologically or genetically. And so as long as you can develop a healthy relationship and clear edges with regard to that in the same way that you can across the generations or with other people, there's huge value to be captured, therefore wealth and financial stability and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the one reason I just bring it up is because yeah, like now in order for people like people want to who are aspiring entrepreneurs who want to start a business, they have to like know the online game. Like they cannot
Yeah, yeah.
like it's if they want to be truly successful. I mean, they can do it without it, but it's just going to be so much harder. And so, but in order to transition, they're going through this whole new world. So, Harlow, what do you think, from your perspective, was the biggest lesson you learned all throughout your life as you made the transition and then you got into entrepreneurship and then you became a coach, like throughout your years as you saw this technological change happen around you?
I mean, honestly, the point that you're just putting out is probably the biggest, like, fundamental understanding is coming to terms with kind of having one foot in the brick and mortar and one foot in the virtual, right? Is and how to play that well. Like I use the metaphor a lot of being on the mat in martial arts, right? I got thousands of hours playing that game, and it makes a great metaphor for learning. Or I'll use, say, the trades because I grew up in a trade, skilled trades for in construction. And so typically when I'm talking to somebody, I'll find some avenue that is common to them because that helps to facilitate the conversation. But ultimately, I think to your point and to your question, it is something like this, is in order to function at the highest level of capability, you have to integrate both perspectives and figure out how to use them well, because there's obviously value and capability there. There's scaling potential that you can get online that you can't get in brick and mortar. But if you completely divorce yourself from brick and mortar, you're not necessarily factoring for everything that you can do also. And so having the healthy relationship of being able to just sort of be objectively self-aware as to what your capabilities are and how to use everything available. Why would you not use everything that's available? You should, right? All the research, just give me all the research that's known because I want to factor for all of it, you know?
No, totally. Yeah, like on this note, like I personally think that like when it comes to like financial freedom, right? Like a lot of people they had to pay a lot for offices and everything. Like
Yeah.
they had, and now they all they need is a laptop and an internet connection, and they can literally do a business through online. And then it actually gives greater and like this podcast is all about financial freedom, right? And
Right.
like through financial education. But a great part of this education is understanding how the online world works. And then the fact that you don't have to do these overhead expenses. Because a lot of like businesses, like they struggle because they have all these overhead expenses and they don't know how to like deal around the area. But now we have this new opportunity.
It's huge. And and to thread it back to the brick and mortar, I'll give you an example. So I'm a carpenter. Like, kind of like, one of the first things that I learned as a kid was to swing a hammer and to build things. I grew up in a small house that got much bigger as we grew up. And so let's say I'm a carpenter or a woodworker. Let's say I make furniture, right? So in the old version of that, you would make a piece of furniture and then you'd sell it. And so the biggest one of the biggest expenses that you had was the cost of the materials and your time and whatnot in order to sell it. But if you combine the virtual with this, you now could create a course on how to make that chair that you just made and sold, or the table, or you know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah.
And then you could host a weekend workshop. We'll talk about the workshops here in a little bit, but you could host a workshop and teach other people how to make furniture. So the thing that did cost you the most and impeded your ability to scale, if you think about the old ways to scale, was either write a best-selling novel or create an album that gets really, Rolling Stones album, or YouTube would, if you can put your time and effort in once and it sold 1 million copies, that was scaling. Well, now you can do it at any scale because there's no barrier to entry to posting YouTube videos or to putting content out there and just having a landing page and say, I'll teach you how to make a chair. And so now I can make one chair and it can have all the ornate details and everything, which made it harder to sell before. And it took you more time, right? So that was riskier to say, I'm going to make a really, really, really high quality chair. This is going to be a throne, but it would take you a year to build it. And then hopefully you sold it. Now that's not an efficiency loss. It's a unique value proposition gain and scales up. And so now somebody goes, wow, I really like the way you make those things. Now you got your niche market, right? So this is like this whole complete reversal of how you can generate wealth through your whole life, how you can migrate through these different career paths. And there is no retirement. You don't need to retire. You create value, 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 value. And then one day you're done. You graduate, and then everybody's trying to figure out how to handle the rest of the projects that you're involved in, because that psychologically is the healthiest way to go.
Harlow, like you just talked about graduation, which made me think about this, right? So, like another thing about online is like before you had to buy these expensive books to get an education for a business or whatever, or you had to go through an apprenticeship program. But now you have YouTube and you have a lot of online like websites which actually teach you about business, and that's like the greatest thing. That like Extraordinary America is all about financial freedom through financial education, because you have to be educated in today's world to basically get to that point. And then there, like, you don't have to go through like all this college debt and everything to basically get a business education. You can do it for much less, and then you can basically go to the right sources. And that's just something that came to my mind, because
you can do it for free, and that's the irony is people are still, they don't pay for college, or I mean, a lot of people go to college, but either you pay a bunch of money for college, which is basically when you're graduating, you have a house debt without the house, right? Or you spend thousands of dollars and go to the gurus and pay, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to learn the secrets. And it's like, you can go to MIT online and essentially get everything that you need for a degree from MIT without the certificate, but you have the knowledge. I just took a Hillsdale College course on the decline of the citizen, and again, the whole history and all that kind of stuff. You got Khan Academy. There's just, you can get college level stuff all the way up from nothing in many different places for free. There's no excuse not to really know what it is, how to do whatever it is you want to do, including financial literacy.
No, I totally agree. Like, and I would tell my audience that, hey, look, the online is a great tool for financial literacy, and you must take complete advantage of it. Don't spend
Yeah.
like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a college degree that is not going to get you financially free. Learn how to like create a business and monetize it. And you
Yeah.
can do that by going to YouTube and like just going to the right sources. There's a lot of sources there. But yeah, that's something that came to my mind.
Yeah, and if you have one of the things that I talk about, I talk with a lot of visionaries, and one of the biggest things about dealing with really big, great goals is to get them on the ground and get them clearly articulated and start somewhere. And to your point, I the metaphor I always say is set up a lemonade stand, right? Like, because I use the brick and mortar metaphor, and it's like you got to start selling something. You got to start creating something of value. You got to see how the market's going to work with that, and that method that you're talking about is gives you the ability to do both, right? Because a lot of times a formal college curriculum is very rigorous. You got a lot of work to do, and regardless of the price, it's just it's another alternative to raising a family, right? Like it's a really all enveloping thing. And so to be able to do it at your own pace, you can then weigh in some of these other objectives to have in life, but it also gives you the ability as you go to have a small, I call it a low risk pilot project. That's my technical definition of the lemonade stand. And that gives you a feedback loop. It mitigates your risk, right? It allows you learning along the way that you is proof to your timing and circumstances to that to be right. So if you take an online course, you take you're watching YouTube or whatever, that's still theoretical. It, you maybe understand it intellectually, but if you're applying it to a real thing in your life, then you can find out that it is true and it works, right? And so now you have application, so now you're doing the whole game in a positive ROI fashion. I mean, how hard is that decision to make, right?
No, totally. I agree with you. Um, yeah, so Harlow, like on a different note, this is about mindset, and I know like you're like a coach and like you're into mindset, right? So like, what is the greatest challenge that Americans have in terms of mindset when it comes to realizing the American dream or their own personal American dream, and how would they overcome that?
Probably the most common thing that I'm faced with in my one-on-one work, but I also see in the culture, and what I know to be true based upon the research that I've read, is that, especially here in America, if we look at it as this little microcosm, uh, the majority of people are intellectuals. So they spend a lot of time in their head between their ears. And certainly all of this technology and all of this hyperconnectedness sort of keeps a person in their head. And so I think one of the most important objectives is to get out of your head, get the ideas out of your head and into the real in some sort of practical application. I think that that's the most important thing. Does that answer the question that you asked? I'm sorry.
No, I mean it kind of does, but like essentially like yeah, like right now a lot of people like in this modern world, one of the things that I noticed is that like the 1950s, 1960s, even the 1970s, like there was a time when when most Americans had a stable job and
Right.
they could live in the same place, they could work in the same place for like 40 years and then they could retire with a pension plan and all of that. But like now there is no job security. And it's a continuation of what we were talking regarding the online world and then the modern world and the transition. And a lot of Americans are having a challenge in regards to like realizing the American dream because like now the security that they had back in the day is now no longer there. And
Right.
so I think it's like from my perspective, I think it's we require a mindset shift in order to get into the new world. And like we have to like take it with in a like there's like a fight or flight syndrome, but we have to go
Right.
in a fighting like opportunity kind of way, and we got to like create like a new world for ourselves. But like that's more of like where I was going into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The mindset shift. Okay, so maybe part and parcel to our earlier conversation, it's not strictly a a boomers type of thing, and it's not strictly a zoomers type of thing. If we
I
go,
love that term, Zoomers. That is
yeah.
Gen Z should be called the Zoomer generation. Yeah.
Zoomers, I've heard of it called. But I think the important mindset shift, and this is like the idea of, let's say, Web 2.0 and then Web 3.0. You have to go post conventional on whether it's either or. It's both and that's the thing to factor in from a mindset perspective is, yeah, you gotta be able to start up. You gotta get going somehow. Action is important, but you can spend an extraordinary amount of action going in the wrong way or just running around in circles. But the same thing can happen in the abstract of your idea, where you're stuck in decision fatigue, or paralysis through analysis is what the way you say it.
I know I've suffered through that paralysis by analysis big time.
Yeah,
So
don't ask me how I know. um, and so I think that that's the important mindset, is to have, again, clean edges, and to be able to know when you're working on what you're doing versus working in what you're doing, and periodize and cycle between the two, and keep moving forward, keep factoring for both camps, right? Factoring for the brick and mortar world and being able to operate safely and in a healthy fashion within it, but also being able to embrace we'll just call it like the virtual also, because the two of those in collaboration work really great.
No, totally. Yeah. That is one of the things that I've noticed. Like, as I came here as an immigrant, like there's a big cultural and like technological shift, and then a lot of people are being lost in the transition in on a national level, right? Like they started off in a different world. It was a whole
Yeah.
different world, like on the boomers world, and then the transition happened in the space of 34 years, and it's never like if you're a member in the audience and you're feeling lost, it's not your fault. This is we're living in a unique time in human history. This has never happened in all of human history,
Yeah.
like that on recorded history at least. Like I don't know, like about thousands of years before that, but like all of recorded history, like we've never had a time where there's internet technology and all of that stuff on this level. And it's yeah. So a lot of people seem
And
to
we
be like,
can't put that back in the box, right? Like it's we're not going back.
like but you see the situation, like a lot of people feel like they can't realize the American because they don't know how to adjust to this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's maybe important in the context of us talking about the different generations, right? Because when you first come in, you have to be able to make choices and decisions, and sort of be meritocratic about what is the best way to go until you get some traction for yourself. But at the same time, you have to make sense of the fact that if you're talking to, say, an advisor or a guru in one generation versus another generation versus another generation, that advice, although may be true and appropriate, can feel conflicting, right? And so that can create artificial confusion. And so it's a matter of being able to take in seemingly conflicting perspectives and to integrate them well in order to be successful. Because if you can't hold your core perspective and then add to it in a healthy way, and then still continue to make decisions that move you forward on your line of intention, you're going to be, you might even be moving forward and you're not even sure, right? It creates that confusion. And so it's important to maintain a sense of objective self-awareness, but then to continue to bring in perspectives, because modeling success, right? It's a fundamental efficiency exchange. It's a huge lever in your ability to get forward quickly by modeling successful actions. But then to also want to bring in your own creative energy so that you're doing something unique has to weigh in also, right? And so it's that parlay that occurs between those two perspectives, which is sort of what we're talking about between the internal world and the external world, and how you integrate into that and become a create a good value and a utility to the people around you that you're connected with, because that's ultimately how this works. It has you the happiest, it has you the healthiest, and it brings you the wealth and prosperity that we're trying to help
I
people achieve.
I couldn't agree with you more, Harlow. It's the only issue right now we have as a nation is that we all these conflicting perspectives that you're talking about, people identify themselves with that perspective, and it becomes a central part of their identity, whereas versus realizing that their identities are temporary and impermanent. After they
Right.
die, it's not going to be the thing. Like they're the objective self-awareness behind those perspectives, and like they're not their thoughts, they're not their beliefs, they're not even their identity. But it's a hard thing to tell people because they have invested so much into that identity that they
Yeah.
forgot that they are the awareness behind that identity. That's their permanence is not connected to those thoughts. But yeah,
That's the loss of the clear edges, right? And it's a meditative practice to say, I'm not my car, I'm not my job, I'm not my emotions. I mean, there's different ways. That's not the meditative practice, but that's the question that you're asking, right? And it's basically a spiritual practice that helps to objectify you from those things.
I would go on to say, and it might sound heretic to a lot of people, I'm not even my beliefs. Those
Right?
beliefs are
Absolutely
temporary
true.
beliefs,
Right, right.
and
They're
they
malleable.
precisely.
They're malleable, and you have to change them to suit the timing and circumstance that you're living in order to function well, which means to change your beliefs is not to compromise your integrity. And that gets conflated a lot. You know, the simple fact is like even religions today, whole religions are struggling in being able to continue on forward due to the rapid changes in the world and to the hyperconnectivity, right? Because now all of a sudden, you know, you used to live in your village, you were in your tribe, like you were talking about before. You just never ran into anybody that didn't share some sort of commonality because of the environment that you were in. But now you jump on these things and we got a podcast and somebody's listening to this who has a completely different belief structure that you or I do. And so how do you relate in a good way? Because if you don't, the alternative is not good.
That's a deep subject, and the time is running out for the
A
podcast.
whole nother podcast.
A whole nother podcast, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that, like it's the what you're talking about is literally the reasons why nations go to war, millions of people die, like so much persecution, all of that stuff. All of
Yeah.
this is the conversation that can literally solve like stuff like that. Like, yeah, you're not your identity, you're not those beliefs and everything like that. You are something more than that. And once you're gone in this world, your beliefs go with you, you know, like you become another person in the afterlife. But that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation, man. Yeah.
Well, and clearly it happens between two people trying to do business together or two people of different faiths to be able to be okay because now they're going to live together in the same village. But clearly, I think, or we're hoping that it's becoming very clear that on a global stage, if you're a bully, nobody's going to play well with you anymore. And I
Yeah.
think we all know what I'm inferring. You know, it's like you don't get to be a thug. You have
No,
to
totally.
you have to there is civil discourse, there is the ability. I mean, it's imports and exports, that's good stuff. We're talking about financial freedom, we like that stuff. But if you're going to be a bully, nobody wants to play with you.
No, totally, Harlow. But so Harlow, on a different note, I know that you've been doing retreats based on coaching and performance and everything. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about the premise of how like got started and what the retreats are about?
Yeah, there's different formats for them depending on the particular audience. So I'm not just doing one. And it plays into what we're talking about. Like basically, we're doing some joint venture projects give you a good example of one coming up towards the end of the year. It's a veterans workshop. We do a weekend type of a thing. We don't call it a retreat because you don't want veterans retreating. You want them in a workshop, right? Because they like to work hard. But the simple fact is once you've gone through essentially the work that we're talking about in this podcast, and you come up with, your life lessons, your message, and your intention, what you want to do in the world, then jump on like Zoom or something like this, start recording those conversations. You start to create your course. You start to create some sort of virtualized DIY type of thing that you could sell for value. But then there's also the group activity, right? So you have the virtualized summits kind of thing, but you also have weekend workshops. And so I live in Colorado, in Denver, which is right in the middle of the United States, which makes it easy. It's a quick, it's a few $100s and a few hours on a plane, and you can come and spend a weekend. So they're shorter. It's just a weekend type of thing. And then we combine, health practices, understanding things like what we're talking about, entrepreneurism, and then to the veterans, we're talking specifically about ex-military personnel, I guess is the way to say it, right? People who were in the service and now come out and they're in the civilian sector, and they need to now, but they're middle-aged, that they're not ready to retire, so they want to create a life for themselves. And that transition can be very difficult. There's some programs there that they can avail themselves of, but fundamentally it's about talking about doing what we're talking about on this podcast, of figuring out how to get your center, because in the military life it's very structured and very coordinated at the group level. And so now you're like a self-employed entrepreneur or an employee. That's sort of a limited decision set, and so there's different ways to continue to have a really great life and create a lot of value. And so that's the type of things that we address in the workshop format. But then we have a media person there who's going to capture that stuff, and then we can do the virtualized version of that also. And of course the upsell then is for these other coaches to do one-on-one work, or essentially grow their own version of that also.
Carlo, that is awesome that you're helping out veterans and everything. And yes, after you come out from the military, like the transition thing is a very important factor. Like, how do you go from that to the world that we're living in right now? And this world is a very chaotic world compared to the thousands of years we've had so far. So yeah. So is there any other projects that you're doing right now that you want the audience to get a glimpse into other than this?
Well, the workshops is the big thing from a collaborative standpoint. I do one-on-one work. You'll have the links for when I work one-on-one with people. I am starting my own group aspect of things. You alluded to the Focus on Solutions group project that I had. That's been a little bit on the back burner right now, but that's more of a philanthropic endeavor. And so I'm doing that. These can all be found through my website, so including all my socials and stuff like that. But I'm also the Focus on Solutions group lends itself to the more ecological argument of things. And so because of my martial arts background and my craft background, I've hosted a Japanese timber frame carpentry workshop of all things, which was crazy. But it speaks to having a more high performance home that you live in and do that kind of stuff because of my construction background. And so I got my hands in a lot of interesting different pockets and projects. And so I've been self-employed for over 20 years now, and you can't say that it was ever one thing. I didn't carry one name tag through that whole thing. It's sort of an evolving process. So if you're interested in any of those crazy things or want to figure out how to implement them for yourselves, that's hit me up,
Which is the next question I was going to ask, Harlow. Well, how can the audience connect with you so that and your work so that they can get to know more about you and your stuff?
Yeah, the main thing is just to go to the main website or the link tree. I sent you the main website and the link tree stuff. That sort of has the calls to action for the current array of things that I'm working on. So,
Okay. All right.
um,
Can you, did you mind like just oh, okay, fine. I'll put that in the link below. So, yeah, I want to let you know that as we're concluding this podcast, that I'm really grateful that you took the time to be on this podcast and like share your wisdom with us. And I really appreciate it. I want you to come back on the show at a later time.
that'd be great. Yeah, I very much appreciate it too. I love to see what you're doing. We had a mutual friend introduce the two of us together. And so this is the first time we're getting to see each other face to face and interact this way. And so, yeah, it's exciting. I love to see what you're doing. Sounds like we're walking very similar paths. And so, yeah, I look forward to collaborating again soon.
That is awesome, Harlow. And I want to conclude this show by telling my fellow extraordinary Americans that look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us, and it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now.
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for